It was always us. Living with our dad, it was always us. No matter what, I would do whatever I could to make sure I could be there for my sister. So when I had thoughts of taking my own life, I would always end up not doing anything because if I was gone, what would happen to my sister? And for a long time, it was always just, I can't because I have to be here for my sister. If I'm not here, my sister has lost her mom and her sister, and I can't do that to her. So by the time I was 21, I had a DUI and was very quickly devolving into a full blown drinking problem as well as smoking a lot of weed. And I had started doing cocaine with friends after work, during work, kind of full on started spiraling.
Okay. All right. I think we're good to go.
Cool.
Okay, you ready?
No.
All right. What is your name?
Chelsea.
Thank you, Chelsea, for doing this. And the first question I have for you is, what is addiction?
Addiction for me is not knowing who you are and kind of running in the opposite direction of figuring it out. The act of not really wanting to exist, but not wanting to not exist and trying to find a way to kind of live in spite of all of the bad things and not have to feel them.
Okay. So let's go ahead and get into your story.
Okay.
Share it however you feel like you want to share it.
Okay. Um, I okay. So my mom died when I was 7. My sister and I were in the back seat of the car in the car accident. So when she died, um, we were on our way back from Blockbuster, I think. I think my sister and I were arguing in the back seat because, of course, we were. We're 5 and 7 years old, and we're sisters. We're fighting in the back seat, and our mom's telling us to stop fighting and quit bickering, all that. And it was like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night in Vegas on the 95. And there was this landscaping truck, I believe, that was just kind of stopped in the not quite left shoulder. He was partially in the fast lane, and the car in front of us took the last open space in traffic to merge to the right. And my mom slammed on the brakes too late. And I don't remember a whole lot from the accident. I remember the initial impact and then waking up, and my window was entirely blown out. My door handle was missing in the car. I was missing a shoe. I was missing my left shoe. And I remember looking over and seeing my sister still in her car seat. I was still in my booster seat. And I remember looking forward and seeing my mom. And I knew immediately that she was gone. There was no question to me, even at 7 years old. Then some really nice lady, I think her name was Nancy, she poked her head in the window and was just frantically asking if me and my sister were all right and did everything she could to try and keep us calm while emergency services came to get us and got us in to the back of the ambulance. We ended up in the hospital, and I guess I threw a fit when we got to the hospital because the nurses wanted to look at my sister, and I didn't want them to touch her until they confirmed with me what I already knew, that my mom was dead. Um, and then my aunt came and picked us up, and on the drive home, I again, with my aunt, confirmed that my mom was gone. And When we got back to the house, it was just me, my sister, and one of my cousins, and we just played Animal Crossing for a couple of hours. My cousin tried really, really hard to be strong for my sister and I. When we went up to his room and the 3 of us were getting ready to go to bed, he was laying on the top bunk and me and my sister were on the bottom bunk, and after he thought my sister and I had fallen asleep on the bottom bunk, he just started crying, and then I started crying. Then it turned out my sister wasn't asleep, and she started crying. Yeah, that was the last time I cried until her funeral, and I cried at her funeral, and then I did my best not to cry about it ever again. I was absolutely certain that I had to be strong for my sister. I couldn't let my sister know how much I was hurting because I had to be there for her. Moving in with our dad was, at first, it wasn't bad or anything like that. It was a little rough at times, but he was our dad. And then as we got older and he married his current wife, it turned into um, them kind of constantly choosing to drink and do drugs and things like that rather than taking care of my sister and I. They would choose to go out and get absolutely hammered and come back in screaming fights while my sister and I were in our bedroom and trying not to cry or let them know that we were awake. They moved us to Colorado and away from all of our family on both my dad and my mom's side, and we didn't have contact with any of them for 4 years. When we finally did get back in contact with them, I was 15, and my sister and I didn't want to go back to living with our dad and our stepmom. We didn't want to deal with the abuse or drug use in the house, and it was always us. Living with our dad, it was always us. No matter what, I would do whatever I could to make sure I could be there for my sister. No matter what, I had to be there for her. So when I had thoughts of taking my own life, I would always end up not doing anything because if I was gone, what would happen to my sister? And for a long time, it was always just, I can't because I have to be here for my sister. If I'm not here, my sister has lost her mom and her sister, and I can't do that to her. I made a passing comment to my cousins that everybody would just be better off if I wasn't around. And my cousins let my aunts and uncles and my grandparents know, and things kind of just went from there. And they ended up with custody of us. And that was a lot. That year of high school was a lot. And ran into one really unhealthy relationship in high school with a guy that treated me really poorly in every sense of the word. Growing up, I always kind of didn't want to get involved in drugs or alcohol or anything like that because I didn't want to turn out like my dad. So when I was in high school, I would, while my friends and my ex-boyfriend were drinking and partying and smoking and doing drugs, I kind of was like very anti that until my senior year when I did, I don't even remember what, for the first time. And from there, just started smoking a lot of weed and didn't really think it was a problem, didn't think it affected me in any kind of negative way. And we broke up when I was 19, 18. When I was 18, I moved to California with the rest of my family and started pulling into myself and relying more on specifically just weed at the time, just smoking a lot. And my aunt that I had lived with at the time, I told her that I wasn't smoking and that I wouldn't do that at her house and stuff like that, but I was going out to my car and getting high and then coming home and just going straight to bed. I moved out when I turned 20. I started having an ex-boyfriend bring home a bottle of wine every night to drink, and that's where the drinking started. So by the time I was 21, I had a DUI and was very quickly devolving into a full-blown drinking problem as well as smoking a lot of weed, and I had started doing cocaine with friends after work, during work, kind of full on started spiraling, and then eventually, my car kind of gave out on me, and I realized I needed a new car, and the only way of making car payments on a new car was going to be getting a new job. And my aunt and uncle offered to let me work for them. And if I worked for them, I would have to pass a drug test. So I decided I would quit smoking. I'd already quit doing cocaine a couple months before. I decided I'd quit smoking. And, once I passed the drug test, like, who cared? I'd go back to it. Who really cares? Um, After about a month and a half, 2 months, I realized that my anxiety was less intense. I was having less panic attacks. Um, and my aunt offered to get me some help getting sober. And I'd already told her no once or twice before. And it had already been 2 months, and I was still not testing clean. So eventually, I gave in and texted my grandma and was just like, "Hey, I need that information that, my aunt was offering for me to go and get help," and it wasn't even, like, 10 minutes later that I got a text message with Kenny's information, and I made a phone call and started off still drinking at the time. And you challenged me to not drink for a week, and then it was 2 weeks. Then it was a month, and I kind of just kept going with it, and then there would be special occasions like birthdays or Thanksgiving where I was like, "Well, I wanna drink with my friends and with my family for these celebrations." I got hammered at my friend's birthday after saying I was only gonna have 2 drinks. I don't even know how much I drank. I said I was only gonna have 2 drinks at my cousin's birthday. I ended up driving home realizing that I was probably a little too drunk to be driving. Thanksgiving rolled around of 2019, and I had 2 glasses of wine, like I said I was going to, and was going for a third to finish my grandma's glass of wine, and, I'd taken a couple of sips, and I was doing dishes with my aunt, and she hadn't said anything even though she knew I said I was only gonna drink 2 drinks. I kinda just looked at the glass in my hand and realized that I can't even keep this promise to myself that I was only gonna have 2 drinks. So I dumped it out, and I've been sober ever since.
And how did you stay sober?
Staying sober was initially staying sober was a little bit of a competition, for lack of better terms, and honestly, it's just the best way of putting it. I decided when I got sober that if I was gonna get sober, I was gonna do it, and I was gonna do it right. And I was going to be better than my father at it, because my dad would claim he was getting sober and then not. And so for the first few months, I told myself that, I was going to do it because I'm better than my father and I'm going to do the thing that he kept saying he was going to do. And I was going to actually do it. I was going to actually get sober. I was going to, for lack of better ways to put it, I was going to beat him at the sobriety game. And after about 6 months or so, it became less about a competition and more about being happy with who I was as a sober person and, learning who I was. So I stopped looking at it as a competition and started looking at it as my sobriety and my journey, with no one else's bearing on it. And after about a year or so, maybe a little less than a year, I realized that, I didn't want to die. I no longer had regular thoughts of suicide or killing myself and, kind of taking myself out of the equation that is life. And I was really, really proud of that. I still consider that a really big accomplishment from my sobriety. And now I'm 3 years sober, 3.5. Yeah.
What are some things that practically helped you sustain sobriety?
Um, Initially, I kind of shied away from a lot of the activities that I did when I was actively in addiction. So I stopped kind of playing video games and going out with friends. But when COVID happened, I realized that I had kind of re isolated myself. I leaned really hard on my family, and they were 1,000% there to hold me up and keep me on track, which was something that I didn't think I would get because I'd pushed them so far away. I realized that that wasn't true in COVID, and that having my family there as a support was something that I needed. And after a couple of months, I was able to get back to doing other things that I enjoyed, playing video games, and I was able to, start writing again. Yeah, it just kind of went back to a lot of hobbies that I had dropped because I didn't think that without substances that they would be enjoyable, and I kind of rediscovered that love for them.
We've done several different models of therapy, whether it be like group trauma, brain spotting stuff, weekly accountability stuff. Do you want to kind of talk about what's worked for you, what has been helpful for you therapeutically?
Um, Brain spotting has been the most helpful, when it comes to therapy. Talk therapy was great for some people, but for me, it was kind of just a lot easier to just kind of talk about what was currently going on rather than anything that was like deeply rooted. And CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, was it was cool. I did enjoy it. I didn't get a whole lot done because it felt very much for me more like a band-aid. It felt a lot easier to kind of push the negative thoughts away and just kind of bury them under false positive thoughts. And that didn't work for me because, again, it was kind of brushing away any of the deep rooted trauma and issues that I was dealing with. Whereas brain spotting really kind of helped to address things and actually be able to talk about things that were really hard to talk about for a long time, like talking about my mom. I couldn't do without laughing. I couldn't talk about the accident without laughing, because it was easier to laugh than it was to cry. I've actually been able to, face emotions that I've hidden from, like anger and sadness, and kind of face them head on rather than hiding them behind, I have to be happy because if I'm not, then like, what am I? So yeah, brain spotting's just been very helpful in kind of opening up the ability to feel without feeling weak, if that makes any sense.
If you had one big tip to help somebody who was either trying to get sober or very early in their sobriety that can help them sustain sobriety, what would it be?
To really lean on the people that want to be there for you and to let go of the people who claim that they want to be there for you, because there are people who say that they want to be there for you, but they really just want you in their perfect vision. But there are people who genuinely care about you and they want you to be you and to be happy. And lean on the people who want you to be happy and will be there for you when things are hard.
What is sobriety?
Sobriety to me is figuring out who you are as a person rather than as someone masquerading as a person. It's living life because you enjoy it, not to spite it. Being able to exist in the person that you are with your flaws and imperfections and being able to embrace them and be okay with them. It's being able to feel emotions without seeing them as a weakness and being able to feel joy without any guilt. Sobriety is finding who you are and finally being okay with it.
Hi, I'm Kenny Hill with Recovery Hill. My intention here is to show the diversity of sobriety. How one finds themselves clawing from bottom is as nuanced as their journey to bottom. Their situation in recovery has the potential to be highly relatable to somebody who is watching. Therefore, I offer the interviewees to have total freedom to express whatever has worked for them, whatever has helped them sustain sobriety. That said, here at the end of the interview, I want to make a quick request so that it wasn't to take away from the interview itself. This request is that you like and share the video. You can subscribe if you want, that's up to you, but at least like and share it so that the content can get to as many people as possible. There is a great capacity and potential for the story you just watched to be able to help out somebody else to begin their story of recovery.